This starts the second part of our 1955 trip, and we are going west, of course. At this point, we were off the Missouri, and we were retracing the source of the Missouri. And this sign is a wonderful quotation from the Lewis and Clark diaries, where they say, "Thank God I have lived to bestride the mighty Missouri." And so we got to this sign. And here we are, Don, Bruce, and Glenn, doing exactly what Lewis and Clark did, bestriding the beginnings of the mighty Missouri. That little stream underneath us is the little spring which starts the Missouri River. Here we are, test sitting on the back part of our Pontiac station wagon. And here we are at the state boundary, entering the Salmon National Forest. It's an old-fashioned gateway. The road, you'll notice, is a dirt road. And it was in this area that Lewis and Clark met Sacagawea, the Indian princess, who then helped guide them through the enormous wilderness which still lay ahead for them. This sign was established, the pass was established in 1855. The sign points out that Lewis and Clark spent the night of September 1st, 1805, right in this place. This was one of their campgrounds. Ross Hole was one of the areas where Lewis and Clark passed through. A monument at the Continental Divide. This plaque marks Fort Owen. It'd be a little hard to read the sign. The sign says Travelers Rest. Again, a monument to the Lewis and Clark people who came through here in 1805. This is very much of a current day sign. It tells any people on horseback or with cattle that this is open range, and there's a $250 reward for anybody who rustled cattle from the cattle that were grazing here. So this sign is a sign for today, not in the 19th century. The sign says this is, again, the Lewis and Clark route in the Lolo National Forest. Again, this is the Continental Divide, Lolo Pass, entering the Lolo National Forest. The road is a dirt road through this wilderness. This film, of course, was made in 1955. The signs here help mark the route of Lewis and Clark. A good shot of the wilderness they faced then and now. This was a famous place on the Lewis and Clark Trail. The Indians, long before Lewis and Clark were there, had made markers of big rock cairns that they brought their messages to. So this is an Indian sign, the cairns, which Lewis and Clark came later on in 1805. But those cairns were there at that time, and they're still there. There's one of those cairns made by the Native American people years before Lewis and Clark. Here's another one, all built up. A rock cairn emplaced by the Indians. It had been raining, we had to do a wash, and this is our drying rack. It was very heavy rain, and we found a canvas hut that a local person had built, and he gave us permission to do our campsite inside this hut. We gave him one of our empty gas cans as a gift of thanks for his letting us use his hut that rainy night. This shows part of our campsite. That green box I made to fit in the station wagon with shelves in it and a cover to keep our groceries, our food supplies neatly in the back of the car. And then we could take it out, and there it would be available to us easily with the shelves and the food we needed. Showed that shelf that I made with the top and our groceries. Fresh eggs for breakfast, and the bacon to go with it. And in our campsite we also had a folding metal table, aluminum table, so that filled out the belongings we had for our campsites. I think Glenn is singing a song here. Breakfast sitting on a log. The scene to our Pontiac station wagon shows just how dusty those roads were. That's a log where the gentleman who lived up there would mount his saddle. Another picture of the Lolo Wilderness and the dirt road in the wilderness. Lolo Trail. A marking along the Lolo Trail. Another marking in Lolo National Forest. Lewis and Clark came through here. If you look carefully, you may be able to read some of the sign. Another sign marking the Lewis and Clark route. Clearwater National Forest. That's Bruce. And this is our daughter, Dawn, 10 years old. My summer costume. Scenes of the Clearwater Forest, Lolo Wilderness. At least it looked as though the interior of the car was cleaner than the exterior. The previous view was our first view of the Columbia River, because we're now at the site of a famous place on the Columbia, the Grand Coulee Dam. A big dam like this presents problems to the salmon, and in addition to the dam itself, a dam like this is built with a little channel of sort of steps where the water flows down next to the dam, and the salmon can thrash their way upwards to get up into the lake and get past the dam. That shows the Grand Coulee Dam and the powerhouse, which of course its major purpose was to supply power to that area of the country. We're on the Grand Coulee Dam. We take a little dip in the lake behind the Grand Coulee Dam. Those are some of the mountains that Lewis and Clark had to struggle their way through. Now we are near Mount Shasta. That's a snowbank near Shasta. That's a great picture of Shirley Patterson. Some views of the lovely mountain flowers up here in the Lolo Wilderness. Here we're checking some of the Lewis and Clark diaries, since this is a part of the world they went through. Now we've reached the Pacific, and we're going to be moving around and enjoying Olympic National Park, which is a famous national park right on the shore of the Pacific Ocean. And that's as far as Lewis and Clark got. It was the end of their westward expansion. Olympic is famous for its very dense forests. This is the beach at Olympic National Park, about as far west as we or Lewis and Clark could go. And that water was quite cold. This is the site of the fort which Lewis and Clark built here at Fort Clatsop. And some remains. They built a new model one there on this very site. That's some not a rather faint picture of a log Fort Clatsop, which Lewis and Clark built at the end of their trip. I'll hold this picture for a minute to see if you can read the print. Fort Clatsop. I believe that fort that the Park Service built was torn down by vandals and then was rebuilt. Lewis and Clark spent, as his sign said, a wet and stormy winter until 1806. It's a bay of the Pacific Ocean at Olympic Park, right near Fort Clatsop. My 7-year-old daughter, Dawn. All these pictures are dated 1955. I think this is our first view of Mount Shasta. In a separate trip later, I climbed Mount Shasta with a friend named Fletcher Hoyt. Here Shirley and I are climbing Mount Lassen, not as big a mountain, but the Park Service has painted with red paint numbers on the walls to show that we're ascending yard by yard or half mile by half mile. I think this is Mount Lassen. Another sign as we're climbing up Mount Lassen. We took a tour of Shasta Dam. Those pipes carry the water from behind the dam to the powerhouse. This is the sign of Mount Shasta. I climbed it a couple of months later with my friend Fletcher Hoyt. This is part of our climb up Mount Shasta. A snowfield on Mount Shasta. Looking down from near the summit of Mount Shasta. Climbing up on an ice field just below the summit. snowfield on Mount Shasta. Very close to the Shasta summit. I think this is the sign at the summit of Mount Shasta. And we signed the summit booklet, which the Park Service has such a booklet at the top of every major peak in America. The summit of Mount Shasta. Now we're in Yosemite, further down in California. We take a separate trip, family trip over to Yosemite, and with some other friends, the Warches, and here's a beautiful lake at Yosemite, Elizabeth Lake. Shirley sitting at Elizabeth Lake. Looking around, one can see the other peaks of the Sierra Range. Great shot of Shirley enjoying the upper parts of Yosemite near Elizabeth Lake. The mountains behind may be the mountains in the Sierras where they built another dam of great controversy. But this lake was not controversial at all. A beautiful mountain lake. The two of us together in Yosemite. Again, a beautiful scene up in Yosemite. Every mountaineer needs a drink of water every now and then. And every now and then we see a visitor. That's Mr. and Mrs. Warch, good friends of ours from California, who climbed with us into this area of Yosemite. Now we're heading home eastward, and we cross the Sierras and come down onto the famous salt flat in Nevada. A huge, huge area, just 20 miles of flat salt, just east of the Sierras. Sometimes men who are testing out extremely fast cars will bring them to the salt flats and test them out for speed. The flats are so flat they can go way over 100 miles an hour or more to see how fast the car will go. The salt flats were, of course, a major obstacle to the pioneers who came on the trails across the West. They had to get to the Sierras, but first they had to cross the salt flats where there was no water, very dry, and extremely hot sun and wind. Las Vegas, you got some money ready for the gambling machines? Try it out and see if you win. Glenn is holding a piece of the salt layer. And Don is holding another piece to show it's like an inch thick and 20 miles long. We visited still another national campsite, the Dinosaur National Monument in Nevada before there's still a string of bones from a dinosaur exposed there on the cliff in Dinosaur Park. Here's the Continental Divide, which we passed through as we're on our way east. The sign is showing Continental Divide, east one way and west the other. This shows how we stacked our gear on top of our car to have plenty of room for three children as passengers, and Shirley. Now we're passing the Rockies, Rocky Mountain National Park on the Trail Ridge Road. This is the high point on the Trail Ridge Road. In future years, we'd cross it many times. Parking the car and looking out on the Trail Ridge Road, we would also see in the high meadows to above us or below us bighorn sheep or elk resting in the sun. This is the top views here in the Rocky Mountain National Park, where we often see wildlife. Rocky Mountain National Park from the Trail Ridge Road, up 11,000 feet. When we got down from the Rockies, like we ran into a dust storm, a real dust storm. which was quite an experience. Very tough traffic. You couldn't see on the road one way or the other. And that's one of our campsites on the way east, leaving the Rockies and heading home.